Hey, this is David Owen.
And this is Marian Cowagowan.
And this is You Show Me Yours, a podcast where a married couple talks about the movies and television that they loved before the first date. And this time I was made to watch Some Like It Hot.
Yes, it's the 1959 Billy Wilder movie that to this day kind of makes me go, am I in fact a woman? Because that's not how I walk or behave or
Yeah.
anything. It's the, can we call it cross-dressing?
Sure.
Rom-com / mafia movie, a little bit of mafia. It's bookended by mafia stuff with Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon as jazz musicians who end up posing as women to escape from the mob because they've witnessed the St. Valentine's Day massacre and they need to get away. And they end up in a band with Marilyn Monroe. Mm-hmm. And Tony Curtis playing Joe / Josephine falls in love with Marilyn Monroe. And Jack Lemmon playing Jerry, who's posing as Daphne, ends up being courted by a millionaire. And he has to keep that charade going. And in the end, the two couples fall kind of, well, not in love. I don't know. Don't read too much into it. But they end up together at the end. Ha ha ha.
Yes.
The end. Yeah, this is made in 1959. A lot has changed since then.
Yeah.
I don't think we do cross-dressing for laughs anymore. The last time I really remember was, let's see, there was Bosom Buddies, and there was some movie in like the early aughts with Barry Watson from Seventh Heaven called Sorority Boys. But which I didn't see. I just know it existed. But I don't think that this is really part of the comedy canon anymore.
Well, but it is and it isn't. I mean, it is still like, it's not been that long since a Medea movie came out.
Well, true.
I mean, and it's not been that long since Big Mama's House 2.
Well, both of those are men playing women, which is different than men dressing up as women, I think.
I guess. Maybe.
It's like, you know, in Peter Pan, typically a young woman always plays Peter Pan. That's not.
So you're not saying that we're not doing cross-dressing in movies. It's just this specific type of men hiding out as women.
It's not part of the plot.
Sure. Yeah, I guess not. I mean, yeah, White Chicks. How long ago was that?
That was 20 plus
that was
years.
A while ago.
Yeah. Well, also that is not one of the finer moments in cinema for any reason, I don't think.
Sure.
So,
yeah. So,
okay. For many reasons.
After clarification, I don't know the last time we had a men have to dress up, a Nuns on the Run kind of situation.
Oh, Nuns on the Run. You know, that's one I've never seen it.
Yeah.
You need to show me that.
It's pretty good.
An episode.
I wouldn't put it on like in the I loved category, but you know, we watched it when I was a kid. So, you know, it'll at some point in the far distant future, when I'm running low on movies, it'll qualify.
Well, I'm going to request that. We were talking the other day about can I request movies that I've always wanted to see, and I'd like you to show them to me. Because my brother and I saw the ads on TV when was that? 30 years ago, and because we went to Catholic school, we had associations with nuns, and we thought the whole concept was hilarious.
Oh yeah.
Not least because there's this line of one of the, I think it's Robbie Coltrane, says to someone, "This is a bedpan." And the guy goes, "Bedpan? We use it for getting rid of shit." And he knocks him out with it. Like, we thought that was hilarious.
I believe that's
funniest thing
at
ever.
least the second time that exact thing has been mentioned on this podcast.
Possibly. Well, that's all I know of the movie. You haven't shown it to me.
We'll
anyway.
one time at some point we'll do a month where we each request the other person show us a movie.
Okay. Anyway, back to Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
I saw this many times in my teens and early 20s, and I used to think it was hilarious. And then at some point, maybe I just seen it too many times. I was like, okay, I don't really like this anymore. So at this point, I haven't seen it in about 20 years. I like it better now than I thought I would. This is not Dave's first time seeing this. You've seen this. Does it measure up to your memories?
No, I mean, I watched it. So this movie is sort of the de facto greatest comedy of all time. If you believe, lists and stuff. I've talked many times about when the American Film Institute came out with its AFI Top 100 list. this was one of the top rated comedies on that list. I guess I don't know if Charlie Chaplin's Gold Rush, which is pretty high on the list, I don't know if that is being technically classed as a comedy or not. But I feel like it might have been higher on the list. But basically, this is one of the top 3 highest rated because it's appeared very high on many lists, including the AFI. But yeah, I watched it at that time because I was just kind of trying to watch as many of those movies as I could. I remembered certain plot beats, but really nothing about it. Just like that was the same time that I watched Citizen Kane and couldn't tell you much about it. There isn't a good reason that the late 90s are like a blur for me. It's not like I don't have the story of like, oh yeah, man, it was a wild time.
You weren't high for 3 years?
I was like the most straight edge especially at that time. Like I didn't drink, do any drugs, anything. Like I was the most straight edge, like 19-year-old that you could just about meet. Except I guess I wasn't like vegetarian or something like that. But there's no reason that I don't remember these movies, but there are a series of movies that I watched back then, like all-time classics.
Yeah.
And I just can't remember a damn thing about them. I don't know why.
I don't think there has to be a reason for that. I think just your brain is full and
like
some stuff has to go.
Right? I watched The Godfather at that time. Can't remember. I mean, I get flashes. Like I remember flashes of it.
I don't think I can remember much about that either.
I got nothing. So yeah, it's really weird to think back on it and think of all these great movies. Like I probably watched the entire top 20 or whatever we had in the video store because I was responsible for making the display, and I tried to watch every movie that I could, like at least in the top 20, and I probably watched almost all of them, and I couldn't tell you a damn thing about almost any of them.
Okay.
So did it measure up? Sure. I mean, it was kind of what I remembered. I remembered it as being kind of like a screwballish sort of comedy, and it's that. Like,
it's definitely slapsticky.
Yeah, like it's sort of very much of its time. Maybe even like a little bit of a throwback to like 30s, 40s, like Three Stooges type stuff. Like, there's a lot of like running. There's literally like a chase scene running through the hotel, and then the two leads go to stop and they slide on their, on their feet, like there's that kind of stuff, like stuff that would later be incorporated into all of like the Looney Tunes cartoons and stuff, or, around that. I mean, later when the Looney Tunes cartoons are often referencing like vaudeville Three Stooges comedy. So like this is stuff that was like you would have seen in cartoons and stuff.
Yeah,
like
it's a lot of referential stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like it was everything that I thought. Like I didn't laugh out loud one time, but like I
feel like I like giggled,
yeah,
snortled,
sort of like
snortled. It's a mix of snorting and chortling.
Yeah,
snortles.
That's when you chortle wearing a snorkel.
What about while I'm wearing a schnozzle?
You can't chortle while wearing a schnozzle.
No, I'll cough. I'll cough. I won't be able to breathe.
The schnozzle is what we call her CPAP machine. By the way.
Which is a whole other episode.
I think it is very of its time. I do wonder, like, what do people younger than us think about this movie?
Yeah,
especially like 20-year-olds. In the same way that as a 20-year-old, I would watch stuff from the 40s and 30s and stuff and be like, this isn't good at all.
But at the time, people thought it was great.
Like put on the Maltese Falcon. I believe another one of the 100 that I watched. It is so boring and so tedious. And it's, I mean, is it a good movie? Sure. But does it feel completely different to modern movies? Yes.
Yeah.
And one thing that I do notice about this movie that is kind of like, in some ways related to modern movies, just from like a filmmaking perspective, is that this movie reads as just a series of vignettes strung together like loosely. Like they're in Chicago with mobsters. They're on the road. There's on the train. They're in they're in Florida. And then within that, it's, they're trying to, it's almost like a bunch of skits strung together, they do the skit with the lady at the lady at the talent agency. Yeah. That's a skit that they do, which is not to say like a lot of movies are like that.
Yeah. I mean, but it's just kind of, isn't that what a scene is? Or like, do you mean like there's a joke there's a joke arc in every scene.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Like a series of sketches. Like they get to they get to a punchline and then they're on to the next thing, you know, or they seed, like they do the thing about the dogs, you know, and then they pay that off and then at the beginning of the next scene, you know, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of like boom, 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 like set up punchline, set up punchline, set up punchline.
Yeah, there are a lot of things where, you know, there's going to be a callback later.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, so this is set in 1929. And so there's a lot of, you know, jokes that only modern audiences will get. Like they're talking about, what's the worst could happen? Oh, the stock market could crash.
Right.
10 months later. Yes.
You say modern audience, but yeah, like those were jokes for people in 1959.
That's what I mean.
Oh,
modern, contemporary.
Contemporary.
Audience.
There you go. That's
yeah.
But that was an audience of people that had lived through that,
and they were like, "What do you mean the Dodgers could leave Brooklyn?"
There's several. How's the stock market look? There's several jokes.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of that. It's almost so like, watching this today in 2023, you don't even get that that's a joke.
Yeah,
because it's almost subtle. And there's a couple of, I was reading back about this. There's a couple of sort of inside jokes that only a 50s audience would get. Like, because the references are so far back that it's just completely over. Like, I'm not getting it at all.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I remembered them getting to Florida faster. Mm-hmm. I didn't remember the whole plot with the mobsters taking as long as it did.
Yeah.
Because it starts with, you kind of set up that there's a mobsters. I guess it's introducing that they have covers for all their activities, and you introduce that Joe and Jerry are musicians, and there's some exposition about they're broke, et cetera, and they're good at escaping from things because the club that they're in is raided, and they sneak out the back or whatever. Yeah. And then they're down on their luck and they can't get any work. So there's this whole thing at the talent agencies, and there's, you know, it's like a whole office, a whole hall with offices of talent agencies, and they just open the door to each one. Is there anything? No. Anything?
I love the doors of the talent agencies are all just like slightly different variations of, like, you know, different sort of like actors and singers, and this, you know, this, like, they're just going to everything that might hire a saxophone player and a bass player.
Apparently one of the names on the doors is actually a real talent agent who was like a bigwig, and the thing that I read was like, only Billy Wilder could get away with making fun of this agent, and I'm like, okay, that's completely not in my not in my frame of reference.
It's one of those things that would be like, you know, not like putting Elon Musk or like Steve Jobs on something, but like some B tier, you know, like tech celebrity on your, you know, calling your company Muscadine Properties or something, you know, like.
Or it's like, and we've noticed this in a couple of movies that we've watched, there's jokes about Trump from when the 80s and early 90s, when he was not the Trump that we know today.
They love joking about Trump.
Yeah. And so, but if you, like if you're 20 and you watch that, you're like, why are they joking about Donald Trump? What? I don't.
Yeah, it's actually
totally different context.
It's hilarious because I recently total off topic here, except for exactly the topic that you just said. Somebody was doing a retrospective on how many times Donald Trump appeared as a villain in the Ninja Turtles television series. It's like there are 2 or 3 different separate villains that they're all New York City real estate guys who are, you know, like it's all it's Trump 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hilarious. And when people sneak that sort of stuff in, and at the time I wouldn't have gotten that at all. But like if my mom or dad or something was watching Ninja Turtles with me, they would have been like, that sounds like that guy Donald Trump who buys properties in New York.
I would not be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised either way, I guess, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had shown up on Sesame Street or something like that, you know, like Ronald Lump or something like that. They were,
but yeah, it's a really interesting thing about movies like this, because context is often like super important, and there is a point at which the context is so lost that you just can't understand, you know, what's going on anymore in a movie. So I don't think we're there with this one yet, but it's interesting to watch that sort of stuff, especially when you watch anything that's like focusing on or talking about the nuclear scare that was present in the Cold War. You know, that sort of looming thing that like today's, like if you're under 40, you don't remember it, you don't get it. So when you see movies like your favorite movie, about nuclear fallout, or something like Red Dawn or something like that. Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't even land that like at the time that was like kind of a real fear that people had.
Yeah, you don't get how absolutely pervasive it is.
And
yeah.
you just, the extra context that's provided makes the movie so much more effective. And then watching it 30 or 40 or 50 years later, that the lack of context just kind of makes it like, okay, I guess. Because I think in this movie that even just the not being able to understand how big it was that you had two male leads cross-dressing in a movie, in a Hollywood movie like this, you know, like that's lost on us. We're like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's kind of icky, but sure, these two guys dress up as women, but like that was a big deal at the time.
Well, yeah, and apparently this came out in the tail end of the Hays Code, which prohibited a lot of stuff, and I don't know how they got it made, but they did, and still lots of organizations, including my favorite one, I believe it's called like the League of Moral Decency or something like that. Sure. It was a Catholic organization. Of course, God bless them. My people, we are the buzzkills of everybody. Mm-hmm. They would make lists of these are the movies that are morally offensive. And I think it was in the paper or somewhere, like you didn't have to be Catholic to read this list, because my dad, who is not Catholic, says that he and his friends would read that list and be like, okay, we're going to go see that. Yeah, those are that and that, you know, those are the fun ones.
Yeah.
Well, they complain that this movie promoted homosexuality, lesbianism, and cross-dressing. And I was like, you can't have all those at the same time.
Right.
Because so there's a point when Josephine, which is Tony Curtis in his female role, kisses Sugar. Okay, well, if that's lesbianism, then you have to accept Jack Lemmon as Daphne, his female character. So they're not, he and Osgood are not two men together.
Right.
And then no one's cross-dressing. And I'm like, you can only have one of those. It doesn't, but anyway, people who clutch their pearls often do not think through the implications of the pearl clutching. The
not at all.
Logic, it's all emotional reaction.
Yeah.
But let's see. This has been revived a couple times.
Yeah, I saw some references like I was Googling around while you were writing it up, and I saw some references to fairly recent revivals.
I think there's one in the works right now. I'm not sure if it's going to be Broadway or a film version. There have been musical versions a couple times, and Tony Curtis was in one of them playing Osgood this time.
Nice.
Which I always think is funny when somebody comes back and plays a different role. But yeah, similar to Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, the gender politics here are just so very much of their time.
Mm-hmm.
Even I think if you put aside the idea of men dressing as women being a joke.
Yeah.
Just the whole, so Osgood is this older millionaire who the minute he sees Daphne is smitten and like hits on her, pinches her butt in the elevator. He's known her for 5 minutes. He does that. And this is just, oh, ha, 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 man, like, ew.
Yeah.
That's gross. And then you've got this bellboy who similarly is hitting on Josephine and says like, oh, leave your door unlocked, baby. I'll come and you can... And it's...
but the creepiest part is he actually also says, don't worry about leaving your door unlocked because I have a key.
Well, yeah.
And later he does come into the room using that key.
He's gross all over.
Yeah.
Well, and also like he's like 4'3".
Yeah.
And Tony Curtis is Tony Curtis. So he's like 6 something and like could squash him. But it's just kind of gross.
And there is, I was struggling the whole time to remember what movie this is, and I cannot remember it. But and it's happened in several movies. There is a sort of trope almost of these sort of, I like weenie-ish men, like slighter men in movies where there's a man cross-dressing who is the quote-unquote ugly one, not really passing that well at all, like more than 6 feet tall and wearing heels, strong jawline, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some like man who is borderline shown to be effeminate almost,
or very young,
very young,
Yeah.
who is attracted to that character, very much so. And I don't know if this was kind of the beginnings of that or what. And there's one specific movie that I am trying to remember.
Well, that happens in A League of Their Own. I mean, it's Gina Davis, so it's an actual woman, but it's she's going to the roadhouse to collect everybody. Everyone else has gone out drinking, and she's got to collect everybody.
Yeah,
and bring
the kid
them home.
that drives them. I'm not talking about that.
Okay.
I'm talking about it is a cross-dressing role.
Yeah,
and there is a slight man who is attracted to this hoss of a cross-dressed woman, and there's a whole back and forth thing, and there's a he's too forward and like the kid, but this is not not a beautiful statuesque woman like Gina Davis.
Right.
It is a barely passable cross-dressed man who I just wish, I'm racking my brain. I wish I could remember the movie. And it's happened in more than one movie, but there's a specific one I'm thinking about, and I just can't.
Well,
put my finger on it.
Listeners, if you know, let us know.
Give us a list.
Well, I think that's one thing where, the gender politics are totally different, because the idea then, kind of the joke is, this younger, slight guy is so stupid, he thinks this is really a woman.
Yeah, which is, I think, the bellboy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's like, oh, you as a man feel uncomfortable when someone is propositioning you unwantedly. Oh, must be nice for you to understand that, but you don't.
Yeah.
And now it's totally different.
And there's a bit of that in this movie. This is the sort of like, male writer imagines what it's like to go into the ladies' room.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like, I'm assuming that given the time frame, this movie was written by a man.
I think so,
I
yes.
didn't actually look it up.
Yes.
But yeah, it's that sort of stuff. Like, what do women do behind closed doors? And I do like, though, that the group that they end up cross-dressing so they can join an all-female review and go to Florida until the heat dies down or whatever, because they've witnessed Spats Columbo. What is his name?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gunning somebody down. But the group that they go in with, they're not all like a bunch of girly girls. Like, they are. It's interesting that they do portray them as just like, they like to have fun, they like to drink, they're ready for a good time, but not like, not like bad girls. They basically are acting like a bunch of frat boys kind of thing in that situation, a bunch of young men who would be in that situation of touring on the road behind the scenes.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Out in front of people, they're expected to be all prim and proper. So it's interesting that it wasn't, just like a lot of these guys ending up having to like, stand around while these women all pluck their eyebrows and stuff. But they actually were just like, nah, like, these girls are down for a good time. Like, they like to drink.
We're going to drink too. Yeah.
That was at least an interesting portrayal.
At one point, Sugar comes back from having spent, I don't know, a long time on the yacht with, so not Josephine, Joe's other alter ego. He's playing a young millionaire. He never really has a name. It's just Junior.
Shell. I think he's credited on IMDb as Shell Junior.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. It's quite late, and no one is like, oh,
yeah.
Why are you? I mean, like, the chaperone, yes, would have been horrified, but none of the girls are, and
But it's also just because it's just a throwaway, and we'll say it now while we're talking about it. When Joe dresses up as Shell Junior. He steals the one man that's part of the group.
I know where
he steals his suitcase, and there's no way any of that guy's clothes would fit him. This guy is like 5'2".
Yeah, they're like 18 inches apart in height. It's not happening.
His name is like Beanstalk or something.
Yeah,
I think Beanstalk.
Yeah,
something like that. And it's he is tiny and wears glasses, and he's much smaller than any of the women in this group. And like 6'2", whatever, Joe steals this guy's, and all of the clothes fit him perfectly. All of the pants, just like later on they do a similar gag
with a bellboy.
where they knock out
yeah.
like a 5 foot tall bellboy.
Yeah.
And miraculously that fits that fits Jack Lemmon perfectly. That bellboy outfit fits him perfectly.
Yeah, I want to live in this part of the world where clothes expand and contract to fit everybody.
And it's like that's a trope. Like the same thing happens in Star Wars when they knock out the stormtroopers, and amazingly the stormtrooper outfits fit to like the point where they spoof that in Spaceballs, where they knock out 2 stormtroopers and it's it's Barf, John Candy.
Yeah.
And they knock out 2 like it's stormtroopers, and it fit. They just happen to get 2 that are just the right size.
Just
in that case, but just like this idea that there's always somebody around that you can knock out that's just the right size.
Exactly your quote. Yeah.
And if they're not the right size, it's Hollywood. It's a movie, so the clothes fit you magically anyway.
Speaking of Shell Jr., who is there any actor who would have been famous around that time who he reminded you of?
I'm not sure.
No.
I'm trying to think. I don't know of 1959. What actor?
Okay. Cary Grant. Apparently, that's who the voice was modeled after. And then someone told him that, and he said, "I don't talk like that."
Right.
When he absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah, they do make several jokes of like, no one talks like that.
Well, and that was listed on IMDb as a fun fact. And they said, actually, in 1929, nobody did talk like that because Cary Grant wasn't Cary Grant yet. Right. So, which is, I don't know if that was really intentional, but that
like in the time between 1929 and 1959 when this movie was made, that famous mid-Atlantic accent was all over Hollywood.
Yes.
And there were a lot of American people speaking with this odd sort of almost British accent.
Not quite British, not quite American. Well, it's like mid-Atlantic. We don't mean vertically. We mean horizontally. They're somewhere between the two. I used to think that Tony Curtis was like one of the best looking men ever.
Okay. Sure.
And now I no longer think so.
Okay.
But Tony Curtis as Shell Jr., which I think is a way of getting me to Cary Grant, is one of the best looking men ever.
Sure. Yeah, I think he needed a pencil thin mustache as Shell Jr. and that would have completed, because he's wearing what do they call that when you have a blazer that's got the embroidered?
It's got a crest on it.
Yeah, it's
I don't
like
know
double breasted, and it's
what
got the
that was
embroidery.
Meant to.
And then he's also wearing a captain's hat because, of course, he owns a yacht.
Well, what's funny is, there's this scene where, Sugar, she says, "Oh, it's Sugar Cane. I changed it from Sugar Kowalczyk," which I think is code for, she's ethnic.
Right, sure.
She's not high class, but she tells Shell Jr. that she was a debutante, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Everybody in this movie is lying.
Yes.
To everyone else in this movie.
Right. But the two of them
except for Osgood. Yeah. Oddly enough, who is completely genuine.
Yeah, about everything. He is kind of the only really good person in the whole thing.
But also not good. He's a lech, but like
yes.
But
he's creepy. But
he's his true self the entire movie, from the moment you meet him until the very end of the movie.
Yes. I want to spin off about him and his mother.
Oh yeah. Like his 7 or 8 previous marriages.
He calls his mother Mama.
Yes.
And you can't really tell how old he is, but at least 50.
Oh, yeah.
So his mom is oddly long-lived for the 20s. But Shell and Sugar are going back and forth about, oh, yes, my father was this and that. And they're completely, they're both pretending that they're wealthy to each other, and like nothing is hitting it right. And it's kind of funny.
It is. It's one of those things of like two people trying to lie about something that they have in common.
Yes.
That they should have in common, because even at those times, the circles that they're claiming to have run in would have been small enough.
Yes.
That they should have encountered each other. But it
would be like if you said, "Oh yeah, I went to Duke," and I said, "Oh yeah, did you know Tad Hamilton?" And you said, "Oh yeah, Tad. Did you know him when he had the mustache?" Right. And I say, "No, I think he'd shaved it off by then." And like completely,
Yes, yeah. It's just, and I bet at the time that some of the stuff that they were saying would have been even more, funnier with the context of the time. They're talking about specific areas and specific families and or colleges and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, Sugar mentions a couple times that her father was a conductor. Well, first of all, she says he was a conductor, and we're supposed to think it's musical and on the Baltimore and Ohio, ha ha ha. But then she mentions that the Baltimore and Ohio a couple times later, and I wonder, what did that train line mean? Was that
At
a
the
thing?
time,
Is that like, like today you talk about Acela trains and that conjures up something of like, mid-Atlantic, Northeast, very wealthy, et cetera, et cetera. What did Baltimore and Ohio mean at the time? I don't know. So. Let's see. Yeah. So the Marilyn Monroe of it all, I have never gotten the appeal of her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously I'm a heterosexual woman, so there's some of the stuff that I'm just going to miss.
Sure.
But she's just so like, I don't know. And I realize she's acting, but she always comes across as not very bright. And just everything is in the shop window, including like the dresses that she wears for this are made to look like she's naked from the cleavage line up, and her breasts are just sort of hanging there, and there's no bra. And the whole time I'm just like, oh, I feel uncomfortable watching this. And like there's fabric that just covers her nipples and which I'm sure was quite racy.
At the time, sure.
They got the same designer to make the clothes for Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, by the way, because they were like,
nice.
no, we want to have a shot at looking like women.
Nice.
Apparently Monroe was kind of a monster to work with on this movie. She took like 30, 40 takes to get through some of her scenes. And they did things like they'd have to paste her lines inside a drawer where she could see them if she forgot them, or and then like she couldn't. There's a scene where she comes in to Josephine and Daphne's room and she has to say, "Where's the bourbon?" But she kept saying, "Where's the whiskey? Where's the whatever?" So they wrote the line on a card in the drawer, but then she was opening the wrong drawer. So they put it in all the drawer, and just like, oh my God. And apparently Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon are, if they're playing opposite her, are in heels the whole time and having to stand still, which they were not used to at all. So, and it was just, apparently Billy Wilder was not very complimentary about working with her. Which I think if you know the whole Monroe arc, like most of her life, I think was pretty unhappy. So this fits with that. And so I feel bad saying, oh, she seems like an idiot. But I don't know. How about this character seems like an idiot?
Well, but I think that was maybe what the public expected out of her. I don't know how. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't watched any of the recent or old like biopics of her.
Me either.
I know almost nothing about her or her life. So I don't know if she was playing to what the public expectation was, or if that really how she was. But yeah, I mean, I think as far as like what it was about her, it was, I mean, she has that, I mean, it's the figure, she's number one.
She's very over the top.
And she's very over the top. And everything that she does oozes sort of a sexual innuendo. Mm-hmm. Not always in this movie, but very often in this movie, but in so many of her other roles. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think it was, she had, and I don't know what your quote unquote average woman looked like at the time. But you get the feeling that she had a presence or a figure or, a look about her in some way that just set her a little bit apart from, because that always becomes the thing in any time, in any generation, there becomes sort of like a standard for female beauty, like in the way that there was a short period where the supermodel body was the thing, tall and thin and petite and all these sorts of things. And then some woman comes along who is a direct contrast to that. It's like, it's your Cindy Crawford. And then you have your, I had the woman's name.
Beyonce.
Well, sure, Beyonce.
J-Lo,
I'm thinking specifically. She was a Sports Illustrated. Kate Upton.
Yes, who I was
she comes along and she is sort of. Oh, right. I forgot. Women have this curve and this shape. Not to say Cindy Crawford's fine. She's not Twiggy or anything. But yeah, and not that there's anything wrong with Twiggy. I'm just saying
you're getting yourself in all kinds of jams.
There are different standards of beauty for different times. And yeah, I feel like someone comes along on occasion and it's just like, people are like, oh, right, I remember women can be super thin, can be petite, can be flat chested, can be large chested, can have hips, can have butts, don't have hips, don't have butt. Like, there's always something that's coming around. And yeah, I wonder if it wasn't that sort of thing, that she was just right place, right time. Because there were other, contemporaries around, your Jane Mansfields and Rita Hayworths and stuff. So yeah, I can't explain the appeal of it, but I feel like there's something about her when she's on screen, like that is just like she's got something.
No, she is. Well, and she's got, like that platinum blonde hair and sort of the creamy skin, and so the light hits her a certain way, and and I'm not denying that she has a presence. It has not been my particular cup of tea.
Sure.
And she was kind of I don't know, like, when I was in school in the dorms, like, people would have, Marilyn poster, because this was in the 90s. This was not, she hadn't been dead for that long, really. And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and there was I think there was at the time when, in 59, in like the 50s, she had posed for Playboy. Like, there was a danger about her that was like, your mom is not going to like her, she's a floozy, or whatever the terminology would have, like, she's not a good girl.
Yeah.
And that, to a young boy, that means,
that's true. Yeah.
she'll do the things that the preacher's daughter won't, or whatever.
The League of Decency doesn't like her. So
right.
Yeah.
Actually, the preacher's daughter will do the freakiest stuff.
Well, there was
the butcher's daughter.
There was an episode of, that just set my mind way somewhere else. Anyway, there was an episode of Mad Men, which is set, the whole run of the series covers the whole 60s. So this was, I don't know, 62, 63, whenever, obviously before she died. So the early 60s, they had an ad campaign that was basically, are you a Marilyn or are you a Jackie? She was being set up as like the complete opposite of Jackie Kennedy as far as, well, coloring, obviously, but also style. And I think, like, are you a Priss or not? And Jackie was meant to be the Priss and Marilyn was not. Which is, I don't know. I wouldn't like that to be my image, but
well, it depends. Like,
maybe I'm a Jackie. So
I think you often see women who are nothing like their public persona and embrace that in a way that maybe is empowering to, like, I'm going to take you look at me and you think one thing, and that's not who I am. But instead of proving to you that that's not who I am, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that you think that's who I am. Like right now, Paris Hilton is on this tour of media where she is like well-spoken and not talking in a high-pitched voice and being like, yeah, that was a character, dummies.
Yeah.
Like, that's not who I am. That's, I was putting on a show I was puppeteering you.
I don't know.
I don't know if that was the play or this is the play. Yeah. And I mean, also, she's aged, 15 years since all that Paris Hilton stuff.
It's well known that people in their early 20s have the maturity and wherewithal to put on a show.
Right.
And then,
Right. So I'm saying, I don't know if that's the case, but I'm saying, like, I think there is a strong tradition of women exploiting people's misconceptions about them. And instead of saying, you know what, I'm actually going to prove to you that I'm intelligent. Instead, they're like, okay, yeah, you want me to be this thing? You're going to pay me a lot of money to pretend to fulfill this weird fantasy of who you think I am. Great, I'll do it, and you're going to pay me. And at the end of the day, I'm still going to be who I am.
All the way to the bank. Yeah. Right. Well, and I can also see there would be an element of, okay, this way, the version, the me that you think you have, you don't.
Yeah,
I'm still, the more reserved me who's over here, unsullied by whatever it is.
Right, exactly. I'm selling you a persona, and you're not affecting the person that I really am.
So I get to keep the real version of me over here. Yeah, I can see that.
Away.
Yeah. They make Joe and Jerry make some comments about Monroe's figure when they get to the train station. They've been hired to join this girls band, Sight Unseen. And they're newly in their garments. Who knows what they have on? Corsets, garters, heel, whatever. But they're finding it very uncomfortable, which, it is.
Well, especially then, like you say, it is, but like I bet you've never dressed like a woman from the 40s.
Well,
50s.
this is true. Or 20s, whatever it was.
Well, well, this would have been the 20s. Yeah. But still.
Yeah. And they're going through the train station and they're watching all the other women and they're like, how do they, because they can't walk in the heels because there's these spike heels that were good at the time. I started wearing heels in the 90s when everything was very chunky, which made it much, much easier.
It's like training wheels.
Yes. That is my advice. Start with wedges or chunky heels and if you start with stilettos, you're in big trouble.
And the 90s are back right now. So if you're listening to this, within a couple of years of release.
Yes. Now is the time to start wearing heels. When stilettos are it, don't bother.
What are the ones called? Like they're patent leather with like a buckle on them?
Loafers.
But also have like a ridiculous platform.
Those are, oh my gosh, I had a pair of those exactly. Chunky loafers. And I mean, it was like I could have hit someone with them and knocked them out. It was like a cast iron pan, and they were this gorgeous like burgundy patent leather. I mean, they weren't patent leather. They were pleather.
Vinyl.
It was so long ago they weren't even calling it vegan leather. It was actually pleather at the time. Anyway. And they can't figure out, and they're watching all these women like, how do they do it? They've got extra, motors and, and then they see Monroe and they're like, it's Jell-O on springs. And I always think of that when I'm wearing like a pencil skirt and heels and I feel like it's especially form fitting. And I'm like, is someone staring at my butt thinking about Jell-O on springs? I don't think I'm Jell-O on springs at all. Should I be? I don't know. But I feel very uncomfortable when I think of that because that's not me at all.
Yeah. But yeah, and she's doing the lady walk.
Yeah.
Like the like not walking like a normal person, but like
it's like sinewy.
It's like, it's like it's almost like walking a straight line. Like
it's like the model walk like they do on the catwalk.
Yeah. So each foot goes in front of the other so that the hips, all undulate.
Do this thing. Yeah. I don't know anyone who walks like that for real.
No. It's yeah. I mean, that's, and she's playing that up, and that's like there is a part of me that, whether or not, again, like I said, I don't know much about her life at all, but there's a part of me that feels like she must have been in on the joke. That like, not the joke, but she knew what people wanted her for in movies and in projects, and that she was just playing it up, sexing it up to the, to the nth degree or whatever, as much as she could. Yeah. Oh yeah. You hope she wasn't just flat, like being exploited.
It's a much more palatable story to think that she knew what everybody thought. And she could keep some of herself back. And, cause I was thinking, so she apparently was married to Arthur Miller at this point, which I don't know much about Arthur Miller, but he had plays on Broadway, so not dumb.
Like the play guy? Yeah.
So, you can write me and tell me, actually, Marilyn had an IQ of 162. I could be completely wrong, but I don't get how that match worked. But anyway, and I lost where I was going. But she had, semi-successful marriages until they weren't. Like, I hope that she had some happiness somewhere. And then I don't know, she died of an overdose of something.
That's what they say. Cue the conspiracy theories. Yeah. Like what? How much more do we?
Well,
what
so
else do we got to talk about here
you at the end, you said that the last line has got to be like one of the best ever.
Oh yeah.
So the Joe and Jerry, so the mafia people end up at the same hotel that the band is at.
Yes,
completely coincidentally. Yeah. It's the, Association of, they say Italian opera lovers, which is of course cover for, it's a mafioso thing. And this is all, and I don't know about all, but it's part of this is they're gunning down Spats Colombo, who is the one who did the original shooting. And, we've taken care of him.
He killed one of the guys he killed in the massacre was a good friend of the overall boss.
Yeah. And now the boss, who is, a dead ringer for Benito Mussolini, which I don't know if that's on purpose, but it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And so Joe and Jerry are hiding under a table and they hear this. So they're witnesses again and they're running. So now they're running from a new set of mobsters.
Yeah.
And they tell Osgood, so many identities. It's hard to keep straight. Jerry, as Daphne, tells Osgood, let's elope, because at this point he's proposed to Daphne and she said yes, and they're going to get married.
Yeah, but Yeah.
And
Sorry,
Daphne says, "Oh, let's elope. Meet us at the dock with the boat, and we'll go on your yacht." Da 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 da. And she's like, "Oh, here's Josephine. She's coming too." And Sugar has figured this out, that Shell Jr. Josephine is a man.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's figured out that Shell Jr. does not exist.
Yeah, he did the kiss thing. The quote unquote lesbian kiss, which is a man in drag kissing a woman, and then talking in his man voice so that she knows he's a man.
Oh, that's true. But you know what? It wasn't the Shell voice.
It wasn't the Shell voice. Right?
Yeah. I don't know what she knows or doesn't know. But anyway, so they're all on the boat. Joe and Sugar are in the back kissing and, whatever. And Jerry / Daphne and Osgood are in the front. And Jerry's trying to tell Osgood, I can't marry you. I can't, I can never have children.
Every
reason
he comes up with why they can't, and Osgood's just like,
Osgood's
it's not a problem.
It's fine.
We'll work it out. We'll adopt.
We can adopt children. It's fine. And finally, he pulls the wig off and he's like, don't you understand? I'm a man. And Osgood is like, well, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Which is great. But that was not, they didn't think that was a good enough line. They left it in there as a placeholder. They're like, we'll figure something else out. But apparently the test audiences loved it. So they left it in. So.
Well, yeah. And you do hear, it is a great line. It's a great ending line for the movie. And it is it's often cited as a sort of way that they were sort of smuggling in a quote unquote gay agenda, both by people who now look at this movie as potentially having done some damage, but some good, and people at the time who were trying to condemn it. And it's really interesting the way that the stuff about this movie gets perceived, but that's probably not something for us to go into as much.
Yeah, we were both kind of looking up, what are current viewpoints on this movie, given that we are in a much different place as far as orientations and gender identity and various things. And I didn't come across a lot of really strong condemnations of it, but nor did I come across anything that was like, oh no, this is great. And I mean either of those from people who are allowed to have an opinion.
It does. It seems like the sort of thing that there would be more like think pieces on. I think we did both encounter the same piece from a trans woman who was kind of saying like, you can view, like, in particular, Jerry's journey as, because Joe picks a name that is just a female analog of his name, but Jerry is like almost already has, because at first he's like, I'll be Geraldine. And then when the time comes, it's like he's already got his girl name.
Yeah, and he says, I never really liked the name Geraldine, which same. Like he knows what his female alter ego is going to be, and he just slips right into it.
And he lives it almost the whole time, whereas Joe moves back and forth between his personas. But the most that Jerry ever does is just take his wig off. When they're in the room in private. Otherwise, he stays in character the whole time, including at the end of the movie when he is trying to exhaust. Like, it's almost like he's trying to get out of the marriage while still preserving his identity as a female, not having to say I'm actually a man. But I think the sort of the thing we talked about before we started is, that's not our thing to talk about. Like, if you want a trans or LGBT perspective on this movie and what it means or what it did, go find the trans and go find the LGBT people talking about that. Because it's not our place to talk about. We can regurgitate some of what we've read, but it's not. Oftentimes on this podcast, we do fall into this trap of like trying to be good allies and like represent a viewpoint that isn't uniquely ours, that isn't ours to possess. And in the case of this movie, it seems like largely those communities have embraced this movie with caveats, but that's for them to decide, just like any of these movies. But I do think it is interesting sometimes you kind of, whether or not something is good representation, just the fact that it's representation ends up with it kind of becoming, kind of being embraced. Like for me as a Southerner, something I can speak on is like Dukes of Hazzard. Like the Dukes of Hazzard, them Duke boys, they roll around in a car with a Confederate flag on top of it. Like they do all that while doing good and like making fools out of the cops and fighting corruption and like And while I don't like the fact that they're jumping the creek with a Confederate flag on the top of their car, considering what that represents nowadays, like as far as Southern representation, it's pretty good overall. Like I have to be able to say, and because there's not a lot of Southern representation that isn't look at these hicks, they're the bad guys in this movie, or they're the psycho redneck killers in this movie. I have to kind of be like, yeah, Dukes of Hazzard, pretty good Southern representation, even though I would love something that's much better. And not that I'm sure that there's better Southern representation out here that's just not popping into my head right now. But that's what I'm saying is like, sometimes you don't have a lot of representation. And so you find the good in the representation that you do have and kind of let the negative stuff fall away. Because you're just like, I feel lucky to just have this representation at all. So I'm gonna emphasize the positives of it.
You take what works and leave the rest. Yeah. Well, yeah. Although I'm interested in just different perspectives on old cultural things. So it was interesting to find that piece and read this one person's observation about how Joe is still a hound dog of a cis man the entire time, and Jerry is a little bit more malleable. I don't think we ever hear about Jerry having a social life. Like we see Joe talking with a secretary at the talent agency who he clearly has been bamboozling a little bit, and you don't hear that about Jerry. So it's kind of interesting how much of it was intended.
Yeah,
I don't know, but
I would probably say very little of it was intended, but it's sort of. It's that sort of unintentional good representation, of like, like you accidentally created something that's pretty,
or at least
actually kind of decent.
At least part of it is, Well, and I mean, like these days, some people cannot seem to keep straight the difference between, drag queens and trans women. And I don't know what else. And if we take this analysis that Jerry is a little bit further on the trans spectrum, then Joe and Jerry are dressing as in these clothes for very different reasons. So it's I don't know. It's interesting to take a think piece approach to it and analyze it. What does it actually mean? I don't.
But we're not the ones to do that think piece. Please go out on the internet and find podcasts with those actual people talking about it. Find articles written by those actual people, including the one, it's Natasha Troop was the one that I read. It's on Medium.
I think that's the one I found too. We will link it at various places.
We'll put it on the Twitter and stuff. So go out and find that stuff because it's not ours to talk about.
No. Well, sorry. Well, I'm just coming off a semester where I've been talking about other people's viewpoints ad nauseum, and so it's hard to stop. Yeah. But now I get to. Well, folks, we would love to know what you think about this movie, including, if you are a member of the LGBT community, tell us what you think and tell us why we should shut up about various things. You can get in touch with us in a couple different ways. You can email us or you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. Our handle is the same for all three. It's Why Some Why Podcast, Why Some Why for You Show Me Yours. You can send us an email at gmail.com or you can check our feeds on both Twitter and Facebook. We list links to our newest episodes when they pop up. That's every other Wednesday. So 2 weeks from today, no matter when you're listening, there'll be a new episode there. We also occasionally, as we mentioned, have links to interesting things that we have talked about on the show or just other fun things that we find along the way. We had an episode a couple weeks ago on The Devil Wears Prada, and I found an accent coach who's doing some lines from that in several different accents, and I got a meaning to put that up. So
nice.
Look for that. If you are not, if you're not a social media person, that's okay. You can find us on most of your major podcast providers, specifically Apple Podcasts. While you're there getting your latest episode, we would love it if you would rate, review, subscribe, whatever the parlance is. If you subscribe, you'll get the latest episodes right in your queue. And if you rate and review, you help other people find the podcast so we can make the charts somewhere. For example, a couple weeks ago, we were on the charts in Luxembourg. So hello, Luxembourgians.
Yeah.
Glad to have you here. Come back. Tell your friends. We got a huge back catalog. Listen to them all.
Yep.
And let's see, new episodes every other Wednesday, every 2 weeks. Next time Dave is hosting, what are we going to watch next time, Dave?
Well, last episode, I made a promise about a certain Wesley Snipes movie. So we are going to roll from Simon Phoenix right into Blade. So it'll be the first Blade, which is technically a dumb 90s action movie because it came out in 99. So we qualify for that. So
definitely the 90s. There we go.
Dumb 90s action movie summer rolls on, and we're doing Blade.
Alrighty. Okay. Well, is it not Blade Trinity? I guess that's the third one.
That's the third one, and not 90s.
That's okay.
We can get to that at some point if you'd like. That's
sure. That's the only one I'd heard of.
Yes.
So, okay. All right. Well, we'll see you next time with Blade. In the meantime, this has been You Show Me Yours. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. The You Show Me Yours theme song is Uplifting Electronic Indie by Winnie the Moog from filmmusic.io. Hey, this is David Owen.
And this has been...
Trying to catch you while you're drinking. All right. Here we go.
Cute.
Ready?